Today on Locked On Red Wings, where Compher and Sprong flashes in the pan, we continue our 2024 player previews.
You're Locked On Red Wings, your daily podcast on the Detroit Red Wings. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Red Wings podcast. We are your hosts, Brian Fisher and Scotty Bentley. I'm a podcast producer for the daily JAWWJ News Radio podcast. Well, Scotty's the host over at Locked On Tigers, as well as a freelance journalist for the Detroit News. And on today's episode, guys, we're going to be doing player previews for Compher, Sprong, and James Reimer in net. Only got 5 more players total left on guys we expect to make the NHL roster. Might do a couple of high-profile prospects as well. But yeah, Scotty, just 5 guys left and 3 in this episode.
Yeah. I think as well, the way that we have it split up is like these 3 are all like pretty decent conversations. I think the JT Compher conversation is really fascinating just because we obviously, when we first brought him in, you and I honestly disagreed a little bit about where he'd slot in the lineup long-term. So that's certainly a conversation we'll bring up again. But I think that the 2 after this one that we have left are really fascinating, which, if you haven't been keeping track of every player we've done so far, the 2 we have left after this are Burger and Ghost. And I think those are 2 of maybe the 2 most single most fascinating conversations on the team. So yeah, I'm pumped, man. I'm really itching for hockey to come back more than anything. The weather's getting a little cooler. I'm ready.
I'm absolutely right there with you. Before we talk about Compher, I got to say today's episode is brought to you by Birddogs. Go to birddogs.com/lockedonnhl or enter promo code LOCKEDONNHL for a free white tech hat with any order. You can see Scotty and I both wearing ours. Currently, if you're watching on YouTube, you won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that. Scotty,
I might just rock this look right now.
Honestly, Scotty, you've never looked better.
I think some people might agree with that. Honestly, that's pretty fire. I like it.
But here we are, JT Compher. And I mean, I think a lot of the conversation with Compher and Sprong is going to revolve around the fact that they both had career years last year after being kind of just not bad, but pretty good. But JT Compher this last season with the Colorado Avalanche had to step up in a big way because they were injury riddled. He had 52 points in 82 games played, 17 goals, 35 assists. Kind of mirrors, and we talk about this a lot, about how these 2 free agents periods kind of mirrored each other these last 2 years, kind of eerily so. JT Compher is coming off a career year. I think he's 28 years old, just like Andrew Copp was, a 50-point-plus season, just like Copp was. Not 20-plus goals like Copp did. But, I mean, JT Compher is a guy who there's a lot of those similarities with Andrew Copp. And we saw how the first year with Andrew Copp played out. And obviously, Scotty, you and I are of the mindset okay, well, we're going to give Copp a mulligan because of the fact that he was so, with the core injury. It takes a long time to recover from that. So we gave him a mulligan, and Compher, hopefully, anything can happen, but he doesn't have that coming in. So I think the expectations with Compher are going to be higher than they were with Copp his first season. You and I disagreed a little bit about where Compher is going to slot in, but I think I've come around to Compher as the 2C going forward. I think the reason why I was so hesitant to put Compher at the 2C was because, I mean, this year, granted, it was a career year at the Colorado Avalanche. He had never had that much responsibility prior to this, but everyone I see thinks that he's the 2C, and all the statistics that I'm seeing is yeah, he could be the 2C. So when you talk about where Compher will slot in, I mean, at the worst case scenario, I think it's 3C. Best case scenario, it's 2C.
Yeah, it's really funny that you're warming up to him being the solidified 2C, and I've soured a little bit.
Really?
To be honest with you, I still think he will be. I still maintain that belief, but I think that it's going to be a lot more of I don't want to say revolving door, because I used that terminology when talking about the blue line, and I don't think it's going to be that dramatic, but I don't expect him to play 82 games at 2C either. You know what I mean? I think that if Andrew Copp does give you again, another huge thing that Andrew Copp brings that will objectively get him ice time is if the faceoff percentage gets back to where it's been his entire career. Like that is a very underrated, like huge part. And we've already talked about Compher, but like that's a huge thing. That, and one of the reasons why we targeted Andrew Copp 2 years ago, this team was awful in the faceoff circle. And that was one of the reasons cited as to bringing him in. So I think I still do fully expected to be Compher. I think that was something that, again, like we talked about when we first brought him in, and that I still believe he can be, you know, kind of that solid two-way facilitator at 2C. But I mean, I don't see why Andrew Copp couldn't be the same thing with being potentially a better defender and a better player in the faceoff circle. So I think that I guess what I'm trying to say is it might be a little bit like pure performance based once we hit a certain point in the year too. Like early on, it could be Compher. I think it will be Compher, but there's nothing that says that if Copp looks really, really good, that, you know, they don't try to find a way to get him more minutes, and more minutes would easily be just moving him up in the lineup.
Well, and what's really nice about Compher is he's pretty much a lock to fill in that role in the middle six one way or the other, even if it is 2C or 3C. It might be a little bit of a cop-out to say this, but even if it's not 2C, it's going to be 3C. And I think the 2C, I think the set line 2 and lines 3 are going to be getting similar-ish minutes regardless, because when you look at the talent level of line 2 and the talent level of line 3, they're going to be pretty similar at peak performance, assuming that both lines kind of pop off as close to their fullest capabilities as possible. Both these teams kind of have, or both these lines have the same level of talent. I mean, Daniel Sprong, who we'll talk about in segment 2 at a 20-plus goal season, I think it's going to be hard for him to fit himself into the top 6, considering how top-heavy that is now with DeBrincat and Reimer and David Perron. So he might end up playing on the third line, but that's still a hell of a good third liner. If JT Compher or Andrew Copp are playing on the second or third line, I think they're pretty comparable overall talent-wise. They bring different skill sets. Obviously, you've laid out that, you know, Copp is really good in the face-off circle. He's, you know, historically at least, not so much this past year because,
right, yeah, that was the thing that really killed his value last year was that.
Copp's really good on the penalty kill. Compher is really good on the power play. He's solid at even strength offense and even strength defense. I mean, I'll pull up his player card here according to Evolving Hockey. He's a 76th percentile forward overall. That's cap friendly. That is not the right thing. Good job, Brian.
Nailed it.
Let's try this again. There we go.
Atta babe.
There we go. You can see here his even strength offense is 75th percentile. So he's in the top 25% at even strength forward at goals above replacement. He's in the top. He's an above average defender, 57th percentile. Goals above replacement and even strength defense for an overall of 76%. You can see over there at the power play offense, like he contributed a lot more than his expected goals above replacement would say. So if you had, depending on how much stock you put in expected goals above replacement, you can maybe think that his production at power play will come back down to reality a little bit. But I mean, all in all, you're getting a solid two-way forward who can help contribute on the power play. I mean, I think you're getting, you know, if you're expecting a second line or a third line center who can play both sides of the ice and put up decent numbers, that's exactly what you're going to get. You're not going to get a world beater with JT Compher. And I wouldn't expect, I think it'd be unfair to expect. And I kind of learned this lesson the hard way last year with Copp. And again, injuries happen with him, but to expect him to produce 52 points again, after having a career year, I think is asking a little bit too much out of Compher. I think if you can get 45 points out of him, which would still be second highest in his career. I mean, that's what Copp did. He came in and had the second best year of his career production wise, despite, you know, his struggles early on in the season. If you can get that kind of production out of JT Compher, I think that'd be realistic. I think it'd be unfair to ask him to do 52 points again. It would be nice if that was his continued pace, but just looking at the trajectory over his career, I mean, 30 points, 35 points was what he was doing. If we can ask for a tick over that 40, 45, that'd be great.
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, if he gives you over half a point a game, I think that's a win, and I think that you know means that this signing is working and did its job. But I mean, it's also important to note that, like, just as far as the previous point totals go, Like, I mean, dating back to his first full season, 23, 32, 31, 18 in a shortened, obviously, COVID season, and then 33. And then obviously this past year was the career year at 52. But if you look at his average time on ice, it went up 4 minutes from the previous season and 6 minutes from the season before that. Like, this is an uptick in production, but it's not just like some random, like I think that kind of nerfs the potential of that being like a fluke. You know what I mean? Like this was a guy who always had this ability to put up these kind of point totals within him, but just didn't get time because he played on a really deep and good hockey team. And then when Colorado got bit by the injury bug worse than any team I've seen in a while, to be honest with you, as a third party, he obviously had to step up and played all 82 games at over 20 minutes a night. Like that, he was a legitimate part of their top six and their power play unit and all of that. So I really don't fear him like going back to like 35 points. But to your point, I mean, maybe expecting 52 isn't something that should be our expectation for the next couple of years. But I really don't have too much of a worry if he's healthy about him being more than half a point a game player.
Yeah, I guess maybe I'm hedging my emotional hedging right now, trying to, because we did get burned with Andrew Kopp last year, with his injury, kind of stifled his production. At least that's what we're saying. I'm emotionally hedging by saying it'd be unfair to expect him to come in and immediately do 52 points again. I don't know. We got to take to a quick break, but I do want to add one more thing about the JT Compher situation. I'm going to tack that on at the end, and then we'll move on to Daniel Sprong. But first, I got to talk to you guys today about Birddogs. You see me wearing the hat? They gave us that hat with our order of Birddogs. I've talked to you a lot about their shorts. I now own 3 pairs of Birddog shorts and 1 pair of Birddog sweatpants. All of them incredibly comfortable. All of them got the built-in inseam, the built-in underwear. I love it to death. They're so comfortable. They're so light. They're so versatile. I mean, Scotty, how many times do I got to tell you guys about how I wore them into the lake to put the boat in the water? Or
your favorite story, Brian.
Literally, anytime I have a day off, I'm relaxing in my Birddogs because you can wear them outside. You can wear them inside the lounge. They're just like the perfect utility all-around short. You can get one that's more of a cottony blend that has a little bit more of a I'm on a boat feel, boating shorts. You can get one that's more of a polyester feel. That's more like I'm going to the gym and working out feel. I've done that with them too. So they have a myriad of different fabrics. They're all super comfortable. They're all lightweight. They all feel like you're wearing nothing at all.
The sweats are incredible.
The sweats are great.
Yeah, the fact I didn't even. The shorts have been my favorite pair of shorts for a while, but now we have the pair of the pants too, and they're unbelievable.
Yeah, absolutely. So let me throw this overlay on the screen so you guys can see it for yourselves. But go to birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL and enter promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat, the ones we are wearing, with your order. That's birddogs.com/LockedOnNHL or promo code LockedOnNHL for a free white tech hat. You won't want to take your Birddogs off. We promise you that.
We do.
Segment 2. Sorry, guys, getting ahead of myself. Segment 2, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I going on about the JT Compher of it all. And Compher, the thing I wanted to bring up is, we talked about our expectations with him and where we think we'll slide in the lineup, but are our expectations underselling the contract he's been given? That's the big thing, is we're paying him a lot of money. Should we expect more out of a guy making $5 million a year? All we're saying is like 45 points. Is that right? Should we expect more given what we paid him in the offseason? Not what we paid him, but Yzerman paid him in the offseason?
No, I don't think so. I keep reiterating this point throughout, contract conversations. Until one of these like actually hinders us from getting better, I'm not going to have an issue with it. The Wings still have cap space. They're still set up to get, X amount of dollars off the books next off season and like have more cap space to deal with if they want to. Obviously, it's not as much as it was a year and a half ago when we had like the most cap I've ever seen. But like this is, you know what I mean? Like this is not something that's like road blocking the Red Wings. And if he can come in and be a really solid middle six center and be effective on the power play, that's something that this team really kind of desperately needed. And I think him coming in and filling that role is valuable, especially, you know, if you can play solid defense on top of that. I really don't view this as like, you know, he needs to take a step up from his 52 last year to like be worth what we're giving him. Yeah, $5 million. You know, I'm not denying that it's more than I expected JT Compher to get when going into the offseason, but that's how the market played out. I like the addition. I think he's a great add and something that this team, again, like he fills a lot of needs that this team had going into the offseason. Until we get to a point where it's like, dang, you know, and then even then, like, are you more upset about Compher's contract or I don't know, like, honestly, pick a name? Like, we just talked about one literally yesterday that I think people would probably have more of an issue with. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. I am definitely not anywhere close to that conversation yet.
Yeah, that's completely fair and valid. Scotty, let's move on. We got to get to all three of these guys in this episode. Let's talk about Daniel Sprong, another guy who kind of just exploded on the scene last year at the Seattle Kraken. 66 games played. He had 46 points, 21 goals, 25 assists. The bulk of that playing bottom 6 minutes with the Seattle Kraken. He was incredible with the Kraken this last season. And he earned himself let me double check on that. 1 year, $2 million contract with the Detroit Red Wings. Daniel Sprong, man, I mean, let me put it this way. Is he a top 6 winger? I kind of hinted at my thoughts on the situation in segment 1, but do you foresee him playing top 6 minutes?
I don't know, man. Like, he very much could. Like, I don't think it's out of the realm of possibility. I think at full health, he's probably on that third line, but I mean, I am confident in middle 6, you know. I think that I mean, for value, this is a phenomenal pickup. This dude had a 2020 season. Like, he literally last season had 21 goals, 25 assists. Like, the production and really just the improvement in depth that he brings this team, I think is phenomenal. Again, especially for the value, and he did that. It's like crazy, really. He had in 66 games. Had a 21 goal, 25 point season while averaging 11 and a half minutes a game. Like, that's just absolutely nutty production for how, I mean, like, by comparison, you know, relatively speaking, little he was on the ice. So yeah, I mean, I'm not expecting a 2020 season, but if he can go out there and put up a 15 and 15, I think that this is a pretty big win. And again, like, for the value we're getting him at, I think this is a phenomenal pickup.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, he had a relative Corsi per 60 last year of 2.67. So that's per 60. That means that when he's playing, his team averages almost 3 more shots a game than against. Like, the plus differential of almost 3 shots a game or shot attempts rather, a game when Daniel Sprong is on the ice. He's a positive asset to be had. And I said it in segment 1. I think his path to the top 6 is difficult, which is a good problem to have because he's a right-handed shot that generally plays on the right wing, if I recall correctly. And you're going to have DeBrincat and Reimer, or I'm sorry, DeBrincat plays left wing rather, but you're going to have, you know, a couple guys competing for that time. Cause I struggle to see Reimer playing top line on the right wing with DeBrincat on the left because of the same style. So maybe Daniel Sprong takes the leap all the way up to the top line on the right wing. I don't know. I have to see him yet, but guy's a shooter. They put him in a position to score last year, and he scored over 20 goals playing less than, you know, the bulk of his teammates, playing middle 6, bottom 6 minutes. And I think third line is a guarantee for him. I think a second line is a reality as well. I think it's going to be hard for him, but, you know, we're talking about a situation where if you're performing, you're going to play there. And I think he's very capable of outperforming some of his peers to get that opportunity at line number 2. And I mean, we talk about player cards, and granted, again, like, this is with less time on the ice than JT Compher had, but look at his percentile given the time of ice he had. I mean, he was, again, I pulled up his cap friendly. Good Lord.
Really struggling, man.
Because what I see is when it pops up, I see Daniel Sprong and it's his cap friendly, and that's why I click it. I mean, he is a 87th percentile. So top 13% at even strength offense goals above replacement. And his expected goals above replacement outperformed his actual, which would indicate that he could have had a couple more points here and there, and that was on a good Seattle Kraken team. So he was already possibly, because expected is just like fancy way of saying he could have, maybe, but like you're looking at a situation where he was maybe even better than his production already indicated on a very good hockey team. And defensively, he was no slouch either. A 68th percentile even strength defender at goals above replacement for an overall 86% in 754 minutes. Again, he played some sheltered minutes with the Seattle Kraken. It was middle six usually, but third line bulk of the season, I do believe. And he got a little bit of power play time, and he wasn't a slouch there either, about 127 minutes. So like you're adding another goal scoring weapon at depth. Like this is one of those signings, Scotty, that like is underrated almost. You know, we talked about it. He's like this year's Kubalik for us. Guys that you signed to like a quick, short deal that you're excited at the prospect of them performing because they could give you a lot. I would argue Kubalik gave you quite a bit. He had some scoring droughts, but he ended up scoring, I think, the second most goals, third most goals on the team.
He had a 20-goal season.
He had a 20-goal season for you, which is exactly what we were hoping for. And if Daniel Sprong can come and do that, but also in the meantime providing a little bit better defense than what Dominic Kubalik did, then this is an absolute win. This is a steal of a contract. But again, it was a career year for Daniel Sprong. So you're kind of having that JT Compher conversation all over again, where do we believe that production is the real Daniel Sprong, or was it just a flash in the pan?
Right, and that's obviously the question. It's funny you brought up Kubalik because I was about to compare them as well. We talked all the time about how Dominic Kubalik was just, grip it and rip it, was just a pure, he's going to get his shots off type of player, right? In 81 games, with an average time on ice of almost 15 minutes, last season, Dominic Kubalik had 174 shot attempts. Now, obviously, that's a very raw statistic, just pure shot attempts, but that was the style that he brought. And Daniel Sprong in 66 games with only 11 and a half average minutes of average time on ice had 147 shots. So you're talking about another guy who, and you can go back, he had 153 in 2021, 2022. And Kubalik, his entire career has been, 140 to 170 shots. So, I mean, if you're just talking about a guy, production, really only time will tell if he's able to replicate that, very much outlier of a definition of career year. I don't really expect him to do that again, especially the assist numbers were nowhere close. His previous career high in assists in a season was 9. I don't know if I expect him to really replicate 46 points, but just as far as, again, you kind of replaced your guy who's just going to go out there and shoot the puck with another guy who's going to go out there and shoot the puck. And his shooting percentage was, has been better than Kubalik's really throughout the last several full seasons he's played, and he's going to give you some better defense. So, I mean, only time will tell as far as the production goes, but I think you kind of replaced him in the aggregate, as a famous movie once said.
I mean, he was the best player at expected goals for percentage on their entire team.
Yeah.
The only player who was registered better than him was Shane Wright in 8 games played. Well, Daniel Sprong played 66. So he's technically, if you want to argue semantics, Daniel Sprong, for all intents and purposes, was the best player at expected goals for percentage. And he's 9th on the team with Seattle Kraken at expected goals against. So if you want to okay, well, maybe he just had so many shot attempts when he was on the ice that it outweighed, how many shot attempts he had while he was off the ice. But he was 9th in expected goals against. So he defensively was no slouch either. I'm really looking forward to Daniel Sprong. I think he could turn into one of those fan favorite types where it's underrated signing. Guys talk about Alex DeBrincat, but Daniel Sprong could be sneakily a 20 goal scorer, 25 assist guy for the Detroit Red Wings.
Very possible.
Let's take another quick break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about James Reimer and whether or not he can bounce back after the worst season he's ever had. So stay tuned to Locked On Red Wings. Segment 3, Locked On Red Wings podcast. Scotty and I are going to talk about James Reimer now. James Reimer, Scotty, had the worst season of his career with the San Jose Sharks this last year. A goal saved save percentage rather of 890. The first time in his entire career that he's had a save percentage dip below the 900 mark. 35 years old. You wonder, is that age catching up with him, or is that just how bad the San Jose Sharks are? Reality, maybe a little bit of both, but I'm leaning more towards the San Jose Sharks were just that bad.
Yeah, I think the truth generally falls somewhere in the middle there, right? I think that there is a chance that Reimer is, I mean, 2 years ago, he put up a 911 save percentage. You know what I mean? Like, I maybe I have a hard time believing he's going to come in and, that we should expect him to replicate that and just like bounce back to exactly where he was 2 years ago at, 35 years old. But I certainly do subscribe to the Sharks were just like actively trying to lose games for a majority of the season. So yeah, I think that all the conversation with him is just really how much do you expect? I think everybody's pretty much that was a very general question. What kind of save percentage and what kind of production do you expect? As far as games played goes, I think everyone is pretty on the same page of like this is the 1B goalie, right? Like this is he's going to play somewhere in the assuming health for everybody involved, his games played number at the end of the season will probably start with a 4, right? Like I think that, or maybe even a 3. You know what I mean? Like I think it's one of those where I guess I forgot how many games there were. I guess probably a high 3, right? So like I guess I don't know. I expect him to bounce back a little bit for sure. I don't if he has an 8-9 save percentage again, I think we're in some trouble, and we're going to see some different guys in net that we've already talked about. But just as far as like what to expect out of how many games played he's going to have, I certainly expect it to be somewhere in the 30s. Start with a 3, not a 4.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I think it'd probably be a 3 because you need Ville Husso to kind of take that step forward this year, bounce back after a down year for him as well. He needs to be able to play and have on his shoulders a 50-plus game season and not let that crack him. I think it's going to help that the defensive core in front of him is going to be much better. It might still be a mid defensive core in terms of like if you look at around the league, defensive core is elsewhere, but it's a much improved defensive core nonetheless compared to what they had last year. And it'll be an improved defensive core in front of James Reimer as well. I really do think that even though he's 35 years old, that season he had last year was more of an outlier than anything. I think it had a lot more to do with the team in front of him, like you were saying, than it did his own age. And I think age is going to play a factor, but he's 2 years removed from a 911 save percentage with a goals against average of like 290. So when you put those two, you don't get a 911 save percentage, but a goals against average of 290, unless you're facing a metric crap ton of shots against a game. That just, those two things math doesn't work that way. So he must have been facing in 2021-22, just a ton of shots, yet he still put up a 911 save percentage despite allowing almost 3 goals a game. This past year, they cracked him. Especially because Erik Karlsson, abandoned all aspects of defense to score over 100 points.
He really did. He really just said, you know what, screw it. I'm done with that side of the ice.
Their defense just absolutely fell apart. I mean, he went from having a goal saved above expected in 2021-22 of a 584. So he saved across the season cumulatively like 6 goals more than he allowed in. And then this year it was a negative 6.84. Like they just cracked him. They broke him. And I have faith that he's going to bounce back. I don't think he's going to put up a 911 save percentage of the Detroit Red Wings, but if it's like 903, that's a serviceable 1B. That's what you're asking.
No, I mean, if he plays 35 to 38 games and puts up a 902, I think I'd be pretty pleased with the signing.
Yeah, I'm right there. I find it. The James Reimer as a goalie is as serviceable as it gets. He is like been the poster child for tandem goalies for his entire career. At one point, he was tandeming with Bernier, who was the guy who just retired. So like he has been part of a tandem for like the bulk of his entire career. And in that entirety of his career, he's been pretty solid. He's never played more than 44 games in his entire career. So he's always split the workload with another goalie, but he's been consistent at it. So like, while I'm not trying to like ring the bell and be like, oh, the Red Wings goalies troubles are solved, because they're not. Ville Husso really needs to have a bounce back year after the way he finished out last season. I know injuries played a role into that. And you have to hope that Reimer bounces back, but I just don't think he's 890 bad. I don't think he's that bad despite his age.
I completely agree. I think that it's just, this goalie situation is just a very fine line at the moment, right? Like I'm talking in like presuming that the goalie tandem as a whole will be better than they both were, Husso and him, last season. And like, if both of those things happen, then he'll play, 35-ish games, 35 to 40 games. Whereas like, I mean, it's like, I don't know. I guess my point is there's a big gap when you're talking about best case scenario for the goalie situation and worst case scenario for the goalie situation. A huge gap, right? Like if we did best case and worst case scenario for like the 1C situation, like, okay, we actually have some decent center depth now, even if there's injuries or people are bad or whatever, like someone's going to be able to step up. And like, even if Larkin goes down, you'll have, like a $5 million man behind him and then like Cop behind him. Like, we're not going to be putting Joe Veleno at 1C. You know what I mean? Like we've addressed that. It's certainly like Larkin is obviously the man and that's who we want there. But like it's a big gap, but not a massive gap. The gap between like the difference between Husso bouncing back and having a good full season and Reimer having a bounce back season versus like, oh no, that's what Reimer is now, and oh no, Ville Husso is going to play the whole season like he did in the second half of last year, is catastrophic. That's like this team will not be like very competitive in the second half of the season if worst case scenario if that happens. So
you're spot on. It's the biggest question mark on this team.
Right. Like it's a massive thing to like circle. It's easily one of the biggest conversations, if not the single biggest, on this entire team. So like, I appreciate that they got depth at the position, right? Like we've already talked about, they're running like 3 deep this year instead of just like 1.5 deep. Like they certainly addressed it. They certainly tried to improve on it, but it is also very far from like a guarantee that this is just all going to be sunshine and rainbows as well.
Yeah. I'm right there with you, man. So we're going to end it there because we're at time, but on Friday we'll talk to you guys about Ghost Despair and Jonathan Bergen, and maybe someone else. We'll see. That's only 2 players, unless those 2 players carry us the time. We'll see. We'll figure it out on Friday. Sounds like a problem for future us. Scotty, got any final thoughts?
We ball, baby.
We do ball. We'll be back with a new episode on Friday, same time, same place. It's your team every day.
Every day.